nobody talks about how crazy it was when Trump won presidency.
When Trump won the presidency in 2016, I was very concerned, and most of my concerns did not really come to fruition until about 2020 and 2021, because that's pretty typical. Usually what a president does in their first term does not manifest until usually the end of that term or the beginning of the next term. And we're kind of seeing that as Trump basically increased the deficit by a great deal. He also brought forth many tax cuts, which ultimately led to a greater division between the wealthy and the poor, and several other things I'd rather not get into because this is more about the social side of things. It was genuinely concerning to see what people were saying. Like, on a minor level, people were saying, oh, you should run the government like a business, which to me sounded like a terrible idea. I've never liked the idea of running a government like a business because the government is for the people and businesses are for profit. And when you run a government for profit, well, you hurt the people as a result. And there were also people who would say more major things that were concerning. People who would say, oh, he's not a racist. He doesn't mean what he's saying when he says racist things. And then in the next sentence, they would say, well, I like Trump because he says it like it is. And it was just a complete lack of mental work towards what he was actually saying. And simply just, I like him because he's funny. Or I like him because he says things that I want to hear, as opposed to saying what needs to be said or providing actual substance. Because Trump's campaign back then was incredibly light on substance. It was mostly simple solutions like building a wall and having Mexico pay for it to fix immigration. When you're ruling over a country of 350 million people, there are no simple solutions. Everything you do has ramifications, whether you intend it to or not. Another concern of mine was the influence Trump had based off of his leadership style. Trump's rhetoric is incredibly ham-fisted, it's crude, it's blunt, and it's not how you lead a country that's so big and diverse. You had people who were begrudgingly voting for Trump, and later in 2020, they became more emphatically in support of him. You had people who voted for Trump because they liked the way that he insulted people they didn't like. I had someone who said they voted for Trump because he was a Presbyterian. And Trump is not a practicing Christian. He's not a practicing Christian if he boasts about the women that he's violated. Trump also emboldened anti-intellectualists as well as conspiracy theories, especially anti-vaxxers. Like in 2016, the anti-vax movement in the United States was largely people in the Pacific Northwest who just didn't trust modern medicine and preferred more spiritual or holistic means. However, by current year, 2024, a great deal of anti-vaxxers are right-wing religious Republicans. My concerns eventually came to fruition basically by January 6th. Not immediately, but a lot of them were realized. My concern for a rise in anti-intellectualism, because Trump is incredibly visual. If work is not visibly entertaining to him, he often does not consider it to be worthwhile or valuable. He disrespects a great deal of people who provide a great deal of research and development towards medicine and several other fields that he doesn't understand. His rhetoric about basically being the tough guy in the room has emboldened a great deal of people to take on incredibly hateful rhetoric in order to hide their own insecurities. My other concerns also came to fruition. The idea that he would not be an effective president because he didn't know how to be a president was true. He was incredibly ineffective when he had both houses of the Congress. His greatest achievements were largely just appointing Supreme Court judges. He was incredibly ineffective when it came to uniting the country. He could not really focus on more than one thing at a time. He couldn't delegate. He had to be there in the press conference room a lot in order to talk to the press that he despised so much, instead of focusing his time on things that really mattered behind the scenes. So when Trump was elected in 2016, the most difficult part wasn't necessarily the fact that people had different beliefs than I did. It was how they arrived at those conclusions. Because we can differ on beliefs, we can disagree. But if your disagreement is rooted in, this is what's comfortable for me, this is what's easy for me, this is what I want other people to feel as miserable as me, which were what people were actually saying when they voted for and voiced support for Trump, that is what was so difficult to see. Because if you do any type of mental labor, you'll realize that Trump is not a good president to have. He's not a good president to vote for. And people who don't do the mental work don't arrive at that conclusion. And to be surrounded by so many people who don't want to do that work, not even that they haven't done it, that they actively refuse to learn any more about the world around them, that is very concerning.